Hello, my friend. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Yes, it's the podcast. The podcast. Did you know that there are over 2 million? No, I shouldn't really go into a sentence with full confidence unless I'm sure of the fact. I was going to say there are over 2 million podcasts, but I think in the middle of the pandemic, God, that's like a time, right? It's like a benchmark in our lives that we commonly all share as an experience, as a human experience. We share those 2 years or how many ever months as a common understanding. It's very interesting, actually. I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about in this particular feature, but I realized I just found it out while I was talking to you. Man, this is brilliant. Hey, so there are a lot of things you can't agree on, like, for instance, your preference, my preference, your idea of something, your sense of something, your aversion to something, or maybe your fondness of something. It's all personal, it's all subjective, and it's all absolutely fucking beautiful. But there are some things we can agree on. Like, of course, there are people within the lockdown and the pandemic and the vaccine and the COVID thing who are anti-vaxxers, pro-vaxxers, whatever the fuck. Screw them. Let them be there, let them exist, or who knows, maybe not exist, I don't know. But it's just as an overarching theme, it's one thing we can say we all went through together as humanity. That it was, of course, there are some people now who will say the earth is not flat, earth is not round. There are some people who deny the Holocaust. But there is one thing, at least in our time, in the past 50 years, that we can collectively see and say, we went through it together. Because, of course, there are things going on like climate change events. There are things which are going on globally. There is the war in Ukraine, which is affecting people. But all those things are happening in that region, right? But every part of the world, every corner of this globe, every particular, I don't know, how else can I explain this? This universality, even universal, yeah. Can you believe that? So everyone on this planet, even like my favorite place, Vanuatu, got affected by COVID. That's pretty good. So you can, like, for instance, you can go somewhere like, say, Madurai, I don't know, or you can go to, like, say, I'm trying to sound intelligent with the next city / province / town / village. I want to sound global, I want to sound cool, but I can't think of anything. What is that little shitty, what's that place in Peru, man? Like that place, La Paz. Okay, yeah, now you sound cool. Now you just said it. You go to La Paz and you say something like, did you know that, Auschwitz was one of the most horrific sites of the Holocaust, where so many millions and hundreds of thousands of people were brutally killed? They're like, we didn't know, we didn't experience anything remotely so horrific in our country. Or maybe they're like, oh shit, yeah, you think that's bad, look what happened here last week. But it's a different experience in the sense there's, of course, common themes of human suffering, common themes of, yes, there is injustice, and there is brutality, and all those things which are common human themes and experiences that connect us. But it's a different parallel. They might say we had something like this. But if you go to La Paz, you go to Vanuatu, I don't know the capital of Vanuatu, you go to Fiji, you go to the Solomon Islands, you go to Hawaii, or you go to Madurai, and you tell them, do you have COVID, the pandemic? Everyone's like, yeah, we fucking had the COVID pandemic as well. So it's just the introduction, maybe, or the starting point. I don't know why I'm sounding so eager. Is something that we all share. Now, where that goes is their own story. Yeah, pretty cool. Yeah, fucking A. But I don't know why I brought it up, because I want to talk about something else. Forgot. Yeah. Actually, I was thinking, would I make a good prostitute? Because, you know what, the reason why is, because I'll tell you later on in the introduction, because the book that today's guest wrote is set in a setting which is a red light district. So I was thinking about that, and then I was thinking, will I make, there's still a possibility. So will I make a good prostitute? Because, see, of course, it has to be by choice. I shouldn't be forced into trafficking, which I think would suck for everyone, and if it is a sad thing. But I like the idea of something being done by choice, right? An informed choice, not pressured into it for money or lack of other options. But if you had an option like, should I do a course in the culinary arts, or should I take up a course in yoga certification, or should I become a certified art courtesan? Is that the right word for a male prostitute? Or an escort? I don't know, because see, it involves a lot of work. You have to physically be appealing. I mean, not just your body, but I mean also your manners, your tricks of the trade. You know why? Also, I thought of this because I was reading this book, one of these many books, which is set about the spy organizations, and they're talking about the FSB, the former KGB, and how there's a school for these spies who are specially trained, men and women, who are specially trained in the arts of sex and how they can use it to manipulate potential, I wouldn't say foreign agents, but potential sources. Like they can go to undercover. They can go to these different people, men and women, and they can kind of hook up with them, then honey trap, and kind of use them to convert them into field agents or into their sort of resources for the spy agency. So yeah, they train these people, of course, besides the other things that you need to be a spy in a thing, like the fighting and the secrecy and the reconnaissance and the what's the reconnaissance, how to sort of trail someone. I don't know the right words today, but yeah, there's also a way to make these people into lethal sex weapons. Not like to kill someone through sex, but yeah, imagine that'd be funny, right? Like that. How do you kill people? Shag the shit out of them. But no, I'm saying they genuinely are trained how to be really, really good in bed. So maybe I'll go for one of those things. See, by the way, I haven't discussed any of this with my wife. Just a thought, right? I mean, it's all hypothetical at this point. I haven't really even gone on Google and say how to become a sexassin. So, but I don't know, maybe my lack of sight might be a problem. Unless there's some kinky woman out there. Will I be open to men? Yeah, I'm not going to be open to men. No, I draw the line there. How much ever you offer me. But yeah, to some kinky woman out there who's like, yeah, that's what I dig. A guy who can't see, who has one good eye but two bad eyes. That's my. I don't know. Do you have a prostitute like a page, like a calling card, like SoapyRao, the guy with one, the sex assassin with one good eye. You just got to drop his pants to find. No. Yeah. Anyway, if I do take myself up on that offer, I'll let you guys know, because I'll be doing this. That'll be good. A sex assassin with one good eye who also has his own podcast, The SoapyRao Show. I mean, imagine after every time I finish, I get paid. I'm like, by the way, guys, by the way, ma'am, by the way, woman, if you like podcasts, you should check out The SoapyRao Show on wherever you get your podcast. This is what I'm telling you, but I'm pretending that I'm telling my potential client who I'll never meet, potentially, because I haven't really even gone into the course. Maybe I go to Russia to become trained as a thing, and then I'll come as an undercover Russian agent and convert all the rich Bollywood and the sort of the business tycoons' wives and get all the secrets. And I'm being so open about it because who knows? Maybe that's my ploy. I'm so open that I'm secretive, or maybe, who knows? Maybe I'm already, who knows? So yeah, that's a thing. Maybe go to like some sort of hidden dacha in the middle of Siberia, and I get trained in all the thing. Or maybe I can be an Indian thing, because we have the so-called Kama Sutra, which people rave about. You know, we have Kama Sutra. Kama Sutra. Then, if you know about the Kama Sutra and you keep raving about how we're the land of the Kama Sutra, why is it that most Indians don't even know more than half a position? Yeah. It's the position that modern Indians practice is a comfortable place for my belly position. So I don't have to do too much work, or I need a good mattress position. Yeah, crazy. Anyway, so maybe I'm one of these. Maybe. I feel I can't just be a prostitute. I think I have to add something to it, because I get bored easily. And while the I don't know, man, as I said earlier on, the preferences and the things, I'm very sort of picky. I don't like. I imagine some chick will like, yeah, here's the money to sleep with you, and she has like body odor. I'm like, fuck that. I'll return the money. So I'll need to have something else to keep my mind occupied. So maybe I'll become like some kind of life coach and prostitute slash. I need a slash in my job description or my job title, prostitute slash. So maybe therapist slash life coach slash. Um, yeah, I think a contrasting thing would be good. I couldn't be like an escort prostitute escort slash masseuse, because now it's too close. I need something like I don't know, maybe yeah, escort slash blind golfer, yeah, something like that. It's very contrasting. So they'll be like, what do you do besides it? I go hit some golf balls. They're like, oh wow, that's interesting. How is that? Yeah, can you feel the stroke? What exactly? Just thinking. I'm speaking about it like it's already like sort of set in stone, but no. Let's find out. Anyhow, before I sort of lose the plot and seriously believe myself, which is a very strong possibility if I had to keep talking about it, I'm going to talk to you about today's guest. Rijula Das is an author. Why do you sound like a TV presenter? I don't know. It just sort of, it's not rehearsed, is it? No, it's not rehearsed. She's an author who writes fiction. Her book, A Death in Shonagachhi, re-released to the world as Small Death, this just now. Yeah, September 2022. It's called Small Death. Yeah, you can get it. Yeah. If you're in India, you get A Death in Shonagachhi. It's the same book. We had fun. We speak about her move to New Zealand and how it is living culturally immersed in a culture that is different, yet at the same time at the far end of the planet. Yeah, but see, even she can talk about COVID to a New Zealander, because that's a common experience. I mean, she was there during the lockdown. So we speak about COVID being from, we're Indian. But yeah, it's interesting, we talk about what it means to be culturally kind of placed in a different environment, right? Because it's sometimes you think, just because you're Indian, I'm Indian, or you're American, I'm Indian, or I'm Indian, you're American, or you're native, I'm American. We are different. But sometimes you might have something more common with, say, a Bangalorean and a Californian than a Bangalorean and a Bihari. I'm just saying, it's context, it's perspective, it's upbringing, it's family, it's language, it's food, it's so many things. So we speak about that. We speak about a bunch of other things which are also lovely when it comes to shared experiences, comes to perspective and what influences her writing style. We talk about this environment, this depth of so many different human experiences and emotions that exist in the place that she writes about, which is Shonagachhi, which is a red light district in Calcutta, and how that is pretty much the setting for her book, but also for our conversation, and how we can learn about our lives and the larger human thing, the thing that we call human. Yeah. So all in all, a lovely conversation with a very interesting person. And if you are someone who reads, and if you can read, oh, great, you should get the book, A Death in Shonagachhi, Small Death, if it's outside the India, right? So without further ado, here's my conversation with Rijula Das. Thank you, my friend, as always, for listening to this podcast. Till the next episode, goodbye, God bless, take care of yourselves. Cheers, and catch you on the other side. Rijula Das, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. Appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me, Sandeep.
Lovely. It's nice that we're sitting here and chatting about your book, which of course is out, and I was confused. But I also it's very interesting for me when I kind of talk to people who aren't in the typical, like either it's Bombay or whether it's New York or whether it's Chicago or London, and because I've never been to New Zealand, and I want to know what took you there.
Oh, very boring. I just I followed my partner. We
Okay.
were in Singapore, and
Ah,
I've lived in a few places, and I was doing a PhD in Singapore, and I finished my PhD, and I didn't have a particular reason to stay on in Singapore.
Mm-hmm.
And we just started dating then, actually.
Ah,
And he got a job in New Zealand, and he was like, "Do you want to come?" I was like, "Yeah, well, why not?" So,
that's pretty cool. I mean, that's pretty bold on your part. You're like, yeah, let's go to the end of the world and see how this works out.
I mean, it's just like, to me, it doesn't make sense because I think I've lived on my own and
Mm,
in different parts of the world for so long. It doesn't make sense for me to say no to moving somewhere, and because everywhere is a flight away if you think about it. Like,
yeah,
you're never stranded. Like, if it really doesn't suit you or doesn't work, you just always, if you have money to buy a flight home,
yeah.
you can go anywhere in the world
That's a
and
nice
try it out.
perspective
But
because you kind
moving
of
to live.
feel so connected through that perspective, right? Others, it's so easy to be isolated, even living in the biggest city in the world. You can just be like, oh my God, I'm so alone. But what you just said makes sense. Now, and I think it makes sense as a relationship because my wife and I, before we got married, we were doing long distance, right? She was
Right.
studying in New York, I was in Bangalore, and it was tough. So I'm glad that you actually physically went. And so, which city is India? Were you born in India? Is that?
Yeah, yeah. I grew up, I'm Indian. I grew up in India. I was
Mm,
born in India. I left India in 2012.
uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, as a fully formed person. Yeah, so yeah, I'm not diasporic, or I didn't grow up anywhere else. So India is very, I mean, of course, every year you sort of realize that you've been living away,
Mm,
1 more year. So I guess in some ways the distance grows, but I think it's still very different from people who grew up somewhere else. I have
mm,
cousins who grew up in America, and they're American. Yes, they're bicultural and they have Indian parents, and they speak Bengali and stuff like that, but
mm.
they're American at the end of the day.
It's
Um,
yeah.
but I
It's
think it's
interesting you
very
mentioned
different.
that because are they
Yeah.
really American? Because I was talking to someone about this. This whole thing of whether it's a Jamaican born in America, or whether it's an Indian, especially more so with say Asians or um, Indians, because there's such a strong cultural pull, and there's also this need or this craving to belong to the American popular culture. Yet there's this other pull which sort of, I wouldn't say it holds them back, but they kind of their color prevents them from being a first class citizen especially in America. And yeah, as an Indian who, as you said, fully formed Indian who left India, what do you sense as a person residing in say Wellington? That's where you're living now. But the reason I'm coming up with this question is because I lived as a student in America, and you lived as a student in Singapore. Since you have this perspective of traveling and also spending some time in a certain society, what is your I would say, opinion on how accepting certain societies are, and also how has that shaped you into the person you are, and maybe then we can get into the writer that you have become.
Right. So when you say accepting as a society, you mean these are the countries that I've lived in. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, just maybe of course, it's not. I don't know whether I'm speaking specifically about tolerance and acceptance, but also a sense of how much of an effort you have to make to be a part of
Hmm.
it, as opposed to retaining your identity, your values, your perspective. And because there's a sense that you try to be over Indian in certain places because that's what you think might work. Does that make any sense?
I mean, I think it does. Depends on the place that you're migrating to. Also
Mm,
depends on the individual. I think just going back to Americans, Indian Americans, they don't. They are Americans. They are Indian Americans. But I mean, this society is fully formed. Like, it's a fully functioning society. It's like, I just finished the second season of Indian matchmaking,
mm,
which I suppose everybody has seen. But it's a total functioning society in itself. You have your uncles and aunts, and I have large parts of my extended family who moved about 50, 60 years ago. So
yeah.
Now we have second generation, like my nephews and nieces are second generation
Yeah.
Americans. My cousins are first generation Americans. And while they are Indian Americans, they are very American. We have, I mean, politics wise or thought wise, or they're American.
Yeah.
It's not the same as my perspective on things. But also they have a very set, they have a fully functioning Indian American society, which is very vast, which is very I mean, you can see in the Indian matchmaking thing, like everybody's marrying Indians. All my
Yeah.
cousins married Indians.
Right.
And the thing is that I'm just saying that it's not like a matter of very big effort. Like you can find Indian food in America more or less anywhere. You can probably go without speaking English if you just like keep your circle very tight. Say you don't speak English, you just got married, and your husband works in America. You can go a few years not just talking in your Indian language.
Yeah.
That's not the case in places like New Zealand or Singapore. You can do that in UK and US.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
to a smaller extent, you can do it in Australia, because these places have had Indians coming through since the 40s, essentially. Maybe even before. I mean, the 40s that I know of. I'm not very well read on the history of that side of immigration, but it's just been happening for so long. Like I think Indian Americans are as American as Italian Americans are American. Like I
Yeah.
don't think there's a functional difference, because nobody is like, oh, we are the original Americans and these people moved in. And I think that's as much as we are Indians, because I have more in common with Bangladeshis than I do with people from Tamil Nadu. We don't even speak
Absolutely.
the same language. Like, I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah.
we are a union of states and territories. So we are also in some ways, we are also in our own little subcultures,
Absolutely. Yeah.
except if you live in the four big metro cities.
It all sort of comes together there. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't live in the four metros, you are essentially living in a small subculture. So, I mean, and which is where I think the division of countries is quite arbitrary and artificial, because parts of Pakistan will speak Punjabi and the dialect that parts of West Punjab will speak.
Yeah.
Bengalis and Bangladeshis, for example, same culture, same language.
Yeah.
So so it's just like sort of, it's very arbitrary what we say is this and that. So
Yeah.
but I think like where in places like Wellington or Singapore, where there's not a set diasporic culture, here is the temple, here's the Bengali Association or the Marathi Association.
Yeah.
I think you have to either make the effort, and there are people who make the effort to keep their Indianness alive or to do Indian things and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then, you have people like myself to whom that's not very important. Like it's never, I don't miss it. It's not like I have to have. So I think it also depends on the individual. I started seeing it as a generational thing, because I think that for my uncles and aunts, when they left, like it was very important for them to be connected to the cultures that they grew up with,
Yeah.
and also they didn't have to do that much of an effort. Like they have Durga Puja and they put up Tagore's shows, and they rehearse and they sing and dance and all of those things. I don't know if my generation, there are obviously a lot of people who still want to do that, but I think it's a bit less necessary for us. Like I don't find it necessary for my survival in a way. Somebody who went to the US in the 70s might have thought that they really, really needed Indians around them to sort of emotionally survive, if that makes sense.
It's very interesting you mentioned that, because there is this sort of sense in the world where you feel almost like there's a resurgence, or there's this call to action where, raise the flag, stand up for the national anthem, especially in India. I'm sure you've read of situations where people are persecuted for not standing up for the national anthem or various other situations like that. And in a time like this, where people are really trying to sort of stand up for national identity, and you're right when you mentioned that India is a collection of states, there's more in common. I, in fact, will sit and talk to a friend of mine who grew up in LA, an Indian guy, and we're chilling and talking about, say, the Joe Rogan podcast, or we're talking about Dave Chappelle stand-up, than I have in common with someone from, say, Ludhiana, right? Because I don't speak the language, or there's no common thing except for the fact that I love the food, and he might or she might like the food, which is from the part I'm from. But there's this idea that when you travel abroad, we're all Indian. Especially in certain countries, like my sister lives in Singapore, so that's an example. Like, you kind of all go for Diwali, or you go for more generic Indian festivals, right? You might go for something that is a national holiday back in India. But it's what do you think it is that I feel what you just said, right? I've never been Indian in that way, right? Going for the like, I'm a Kannadiga from Karnataka, so when in America they had this Kannada Kuta, which is like the Bengali Association, but they have these specific festivals which are festivals or activities which are sort of related to the identity of Kannadigas. And I never felt a certain draw to it. And, maybe going for like the first show of a Bollywood movie, or going and eating a certain thing. I mean, the food, of course, was always a thing when you're a student, and, someone's like, would you like free food? You're like, of course, I don't care what it is. But what do you think it is that makes you comfortable not sort of celebrating these things, whether it's being a part of associations or gathering with other Indians? What makes you comfortable with your identity? What do you think that is? And what do you think is this other end, which is making people more insecure with their identity, and this draw to, we need to sort of flaunt our Indianness, for lack of a better word?
Well, I honestly think that the insecurity about being Indian and having to flaunt it, I think that's a very sinister, manipulative political line. And I don't know how deep we want to go into that, but that is.
I'm happy to go into it. As I told you, it's not a political podcast, but I'm happy talking about everything. Yeah.
I think that is a very that's a diet that is being fed for very sinister purposes to create that sense, and that's been happening over the last 6 years, 7 years, and that's a very sustained program, which is what leads to the oppression of minorities and the increased problems with free speech and incarcerating anybody who disagrees with you that we're seeing in our country. I mean, this is, the thing is that nobody is reinventing the wheel. The thing is, everything has been done before.
Yeah.
So this is a classic play from the fascist handbook. And one of those things is a rise in national identity, pride feeling, which is a very, and if you study fascist regimes anywhere across the world, is the same thing happens everywhere.
Yeah.
There is always a resurgence of hum ye hain, like this is us, and boiling down of this identity into one essentializing little story, whereas the truth is that there was no India before the British left.
Yeah.
There was no India. It was just this. It's a collection. There were small states. They were independently ruled. They had their own cultures. They were their own fiefdoms.
Yeah.
Then the British came, and then they colonized it as a country.
Yeah.
And then 200 years later, when they left, when we managed to kick them out, we had a country in the political sense of the term, that a nation state exists, how we understand it with one constitution and stuff like that. But you can't. Nobody is going to buy that narrative if you're selling that narrative to create a certain craze about patriotism or nationalism. So unfortunately, it's a pack of lies at the end of the day, and and it's always in opposition to somebody like, oh, we need to be proud of our heritage. But what is our heritage? What
Absolutely.
heritage are we talking about?
And
Are we
yours and
talking about
mine are very
the
different in what we look
yeah,
for.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or is the heritage of the Chola dynasty or the Pal dynasty or the Myanmaris
Yeah.
or the Mughals? Like we have so much heritage. Like what heritage are we even talking about? Like it's not like we have only one heritage that, like, but that's the nature of history. That's the nature of human civilization.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, this whole hum Bharatiya hai, this is a very manufactured. It's a dream, it's a fantasy. It's a brand.
And it's
And
a
like any
story that
brand,
someone else has written to suit them, right? It almost sounds like there are 10 traits that this particular
yeah.
identity needs, and if you don't fit those 10 traits or those 10 characteristics or whatever the word you want to use for it, you're not Indian or not
Yeah.
suiting our agenda, whatever the agenda
Yeah.
may be.
And we've always had that brand.
Mm.
See, Hindi was my third language in school,
I don't even
and
speak it. Yeah.
you know,
I'm not Indian.
yeah, everybody has that had those Hindi books.
Yeah.
There was the Adarsh Balak one. So Adarsh Balak does this, Adarsh Balak does that.
Mm.
The Adarsh Balak will do XYZ. So it's a template like that. But we've always had brand India, and like say there's been a brand Congress, for example. Like
Yeah.
they wear khadi. I'm talking about 90s India because I grew up in the 90s India.
Yeah.
There's been a brand Congress, let's say. There's an India there. There is an India that is the brand like that. 90s India was very Mile Sur Mera Tumhara, that sort of the song, that to me that epitomizes that sort of thing. But there is also, there's other kinds of India, like Amul ads is a
Yeah.
kind of brand. Like I'm just saying that nations are brands, and
Yeah.
sometimes you can use them to advertise, but you can also like Tourism India does,
Yeah.
as a matter of fact. But you can also turn that brand to feed a very sinister kind of patriotic or nationalist style, which then becomes intolerant of any other views.
In fact,
Completely.
someone had put something up, and I think they had a quote from Tagore, in which I'm obviously paraphrasing, in which he says, "It's a scary situation when patriotism overtakes humanity." In the sense, I think what is that if the idea of patriotism is put up above the value of human life, I think it's a scary situation. And I think a lot of time, and this is not just in India. I mean, of course, we are both Indian, so we can talk about it in this context. But it's happening everywhere in a lot of countries.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But I want to say that this is also not new in the sense that there's always, like I said, like there's no reinventing the wheel. This has happened in Nazi Germany. This has happened because that was one of the main things. The rise in German nationalism is a
Yeah.
whole subject in itself. Like UK had that. UK has had vast periods when they were the most imperialistic,
Yeah.
conquering everywhere. There's a big, it's not new. Like just because it's 2022 and we're noticing it doesn't mean it's new. It's happened. Humans are not very creative.
It's a new
We're actually
publication. Let's call it that.
yeah, we're actually like doing the same things that we've done
Yeah.
throughout our history and civilization. We don't, like, humans don't actually go off template as much as we think that we do.
Yeah, we're pretty
You know,
self-destructive at least we're consistent in our self-destructiveness.
we're very consistent.
Yeah.
We just try the same things over and over again.
The
That just
color of the
doesn't,
people, the language, the food, all that changes, but it's pretty much.
all that changes, but it doesn't actually change anywhere. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I actually, which is again, I think a reason that I don't really believe in national, like I don't believe in a nation state. I
Yeah.
don't believe in a country, like I don't think the country ends. I don't think my country ends at the border security force.
Yeah.
And then 2 steps next to Dhaka, it's not my country. I mean, sure, it's not. Politically, it's not. It's
Yeah.
a separate entity. But I understand when they talk to me. Like, what am I supposed to do with that? Am I supposed to say, no, you're an alien? Like, I don't understand
Yeah,
what
you
you're
probably
saying.
feel more at home there, 2 steps away from the so-called end of the Indian border, than in Bangalore, right? Where you might not know the language, you might not know the food, so which is very interesting that I mean, it's
Yeah,
happening.
around the dinner table, obviously, because my father came from Bangladesh before it was Bangladesh.
Yeah,
So I've never actually seen his home, you know. And if you go through, and if you actually are talking about Indian culture and like, you know, the patrilineal culture, then that's where I come from. That's my ancestral home.
yeah.
You know, if you start looking at people's origins, I think we will find many of us come because we come from the subcontinent. We come from the Indian subcontinent.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that you can, you know, you can twist that. But I also think that people across the ages have seen through the scam that is nationalism.
Yeah.
And it's not just us, you know, I mean, Tagore saw through it. You know, other people, I mean, which is not to say that we don't love our countries, but
Yeah.
what does it mean when we love our country?
Yeah.
We love a certain way of being. We love a certain way of seeing the world, a viewpoint, a food, you know, the way we do things or the way we talk, or sometimes it's just plain old nostalgia.
Or even certain
But
regions of the country which you
yeah,
would like to revisit or visit, or you'd like
yeah.
certain, I mean, the rivers, and of course we all. I mean, I've been to Calcutta, but I've never been, say, to other parts of West Bengal. But I have certain parts in Karnataka which I'm like, this little part is India for me, or it's home, let's
Yeah.
call it that. And it's not where I belong, but it's something that I don't know what the word is, whether I take pride in it, or it's something like, for instance, Bangalore, right, is now of course called Bengaluru. It's called the IT city. It's called so many different things. But when we were growing up, we never really had a Kannada speaking identity in Bangalore. In fact,
Mhm.
like the school I went to, we had Muslims, we had Christians. I went to a girls' school till the age of 9, because it was co-ed till then. But I remember, like, it was a mix, right? Like, our tiffin boxes were like a representation of Bangalore. It was someone bringing like a keema puff, someone bringing like a idli sambar, someone bringing like a whatever roll. I think that's what Bangalore was. You would go for piano classes at a cathedral. Then, I mean, for me, or then you would go to like a place called Nizam's for rolls, and then you would go to the Bangalore club set up by the British. It was lovely, and that's gone. Now it's like, oh, you don't. If you are in a certain part, then you are a Hindi speaking part of Bangalore. You're in a Kannada speaking part of Bangalore. You are. I'm not saying it's so distinct, but it's still, that is reared its ugly head, right? Oh, you are. Like when you do a show in English, people are like, that show should be in Kannada. I'm like, no, why don't you do another show in Kannada? Because you
Yeah.
celebrate your Kannada-ness and the language and what that culture represents for you. Because for me, Kannada is just a language, and while I speak the language and I live in the state of Karnataka, it doesn't mean that I have to do everything in Kannada to be a Kannadiga. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well,
Yeah.
I also don't understand the insecurity because,
Mm.
I mean, English is an Indian language. It is
Yeah.
an official language of
We
India.
have a very Indian way of speaking the language. I
And
agree with you.
we
Yeah.
claim the language entirely. It would be like saying that, you know, somehow, you know, the French language is used in France, but it's also used in Belgium and
Yeah.
Switzerland. And it's a language. I mean,
Yeah.
languages don't belong to anybody.
Yeah.
We make the language. And India,
Yeah.
I think, English, I think at this point of time is a very Indian language, or it
Yeah.
can be a very Indian language.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and coming back to the country point of view, I always, so it's been 10 years, that a decade this year that I don't live in India anymore. And
Okay.
I think for me, whenever I like, you know, going back to India, it actually, you don't even have to get to India. It starts from the plane.
Yeah.
Like any India bound plane, if you've ever been from somewhere else, it's like it's instant, it's country. Like when I was going, nobody was wearing a mask, everybody was asking other people to switch seats, everybody was taking out the buzz and eating even if they didn't need to. Everybody was, it's like, you know, it's like what I'm trying to say is that it's so much like a train journey that we
Yeah.
used to take in like
Yeah.
the 90s. You know, it's like a bus full of people going back to
Yeah.
India. So in some ways, that aircraft is India, is what I'm trying to say. Like,
No, I
you know,
totally get it. Like, you would, like, for
yeah,
instance, an example of what you just said was when I was on a Air India flight. It just so happened, and typically if you had a non-Indian sitting next to you, you would, like, so this lady had 2 kids, and I was sitting in the front row because obviously I needed assistance, so I was sitting in the bassinet row, and then this lady's it's quite, it's really weird because you take liberties with Indians, right? When you're in that and if it was like a non-Indian, I'm sure she wouldn't have done what she did, because what happened was she was obviously taking care of this baby as she should, and I think on takeoff the diaper fell and she's like, just pick it up no quickly. I'm like, dude, it's such an, I mean, the way she said it, you wouldn't tell a British person or an American person or a non-Indian person, just like jaldi karo, like that was the attitude, right?
But it's so obvious. Why aren't you just
Yeah,
doing
like
it?
just pick it up. Or yeah,
Yeah,
I get it totally.
yeah,
And it's more a
yeah.
vibe than any particular act. I think that's what I
Exactly.
sensed.
And
Yeah,
that's what I think, that I don't, but also like, like nobody else has to fit into someone else's idea of what is patriotic or what is nationalist, because
yeah,
who gets to decide, right? Like, I mean, criticizing your country is an act of patriotism because it comes
yeah.
from deep love. It comes from deep love. And
You want that improvement.
unfortunately,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I mean, unfortunately, like people don't have enough depth and and range and intelligence, frankly, to understand that you can only criticize or demand change from a place of deep love.
that's
You
absent though. That's absent
yeah,
because certain traits and certain, and as you said, right, there are certain things that are kept as the standards for national pride or
yeah,
nationalism, and if those very shallow values, as you said, like if you don't stand up for the national anthem, you're seen as a traitor, even though you might be in a wheelchair and you physically can't stand up. It's ridiculous, the stories you hear. I mean, I'm not saying all of it is true, or maybe all of it may be exaggerated, but I mean, I'm not going to fact check or anything, but just even the
yeah.
sense of that, like that someone would even talk about that, like it's, I mean, I'm not saying the national anthem. I don't like suddenly someone will be like, this podcast promotes hatred. No, the thing you mentioned,
Right.
which it comes from a place of deep love. But if you're not able to have the emotional maturity to look deep, then how do you even have a conversation with someone, right? Because then it becomes a yelling match. It becomes attacking each other for certain perceived values of pride and patriotism, whatever the word you want to use.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not saying that, I mean, demanding change, yeah, like I say, it has to come from, it's not just holding a flag, holding a flag doesn't prove how much you love a country.
Especially if you
Or
just the next moment throw that flag in the bin and clog the drains, it means nothing. Or bang plates to
yeah,
show that you care about
yeah,
it's
yeah.
whatever it may be.
I mean,
You're right. Yeah,
I saw a tweet today actually where somebody posted a picture of a high rise apparently in Calcutta, but who
mm,
knows? Every high rise looks the same all
yeah,
over the world, and said that, well, it is so sad that Bengal, that produced so many revolutionaries, and not one single tricolor in any of the windows, and that's such a stupid thing to say. Like,
yeah.
that doesn't mean you love your country more or less.
It's
It's just like there are different ways of loving. And what is loving your country? Like
yeah,
love, like what is love? Like, do we even understand like, we don't even understand the concept of human love, like much
yeah,
less the concept of loving
yeah.
your country and, stuff like that.
No,
It's
I'm sure
not,
the love between two people itself is so complex.
it's so
Yeah,
complex, yes.
yeah,
And
and then how can we apply that concept on such a large scale, right?
well, I mean, a better analogy is probably the love for your family. Like,
Yeah,
your love for your family is not
perfect. Yeah,
unquestioning.
yeah,
It's not, otherwise it's a tyranny. If you can, I mean, it's like the analogy of that is people getting angry if it's like never being able to say anything against your father or your mother.
yeah.
Like, you'd have to, every family fights, you have to be able to say, well, that's not right, or that's not how I'm going to live my life, or no, I'm going to do things differently, or I'm going to raise my kids differently. So, shutting down dissent is the same if you do it across the country as you would do across the family. Like, our relationships with our families are fraught. They're not always, linear. Like, oh, it is
Yeah,
all
yeah. It's very
amazing in a
complex,
sense.
right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's not like those Hindi, like, the Hindi books, the moral stories or whatever, like,
Yeah.
Adarsh Balak behaves like this. It's a
That
more
book really bothered you,
complicated
didn't it?
relationship.
That book really got you when you were young.
Oh yeah, I mean, because they used to look so unreal. Like when
Yeah,
you look
yeah.
at it, even the cartoon, because they were like pictures,
Mm.
basically. When you look at the picture, and sometimes you were like, nothing looks like this. Like my
Yeah.
house doesn't look like this.
And
So you look like
and on the
this.
flip side to that, it doesn't mean just because if I go to America and if someone's like, oh, I love Bollywood movie, I'm like, oh, I can't stand it. They're like, oh my god, how can you be an Indian and not love Bollywood? I'm like, dude, that has absolutely no weightage on my
Yeah,
being from India. In fact, I'm less Indian than a lot of the American Indians, like you said, your cousins or whoever it may be, because
yes,
their parents said you have to watch it because it's your Indianness, that because they left it, they felt that they have to put these
right.
things down. And I speak English, as you said. I speak English. Growing up in the 90s, my favorite bands were, I mean, I'm going to say it out loud and don't judge me, but Air Supply, Meatloaf, Journey. I loved these bands, right? I loved Queen. I listened to, and I was looking forward to drinking beer, like going to a pub. And I'm sure if
Must
you're
have
from
been a
Calcutta,
very cool teenager.
I
I
mean, I
haven't
was like
heard of them
19,
at
20,
all.
but you know what I mean, like Calcutta, Bangalore, there are a lot of those similarities of listening, smoking cigarettes and chilling
Yeah.
and listening to music, whoever it may be, right? The band or whatever the
Hmm.
genre may be. But there was that sense and of my mom would take me to plays at these theaters and whatever it may be, like it wasn't a Kannada play, even though our family, we have poets who are Kannadiga, like who write in Kannada. It was maybe watching a Nasiruddin Shah play in English, or it wasn't any of that made me less or more Indian. It was just my experience, and that for me now is sort of something which is nostalgia. And I think
Yeah.
everyone is entitled to their unique experience, that whatever circumstances that they grew up in gave them a chance to. It doesn't take away or enhance your national identity, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me personally, like I come from a very, I come from a very middle class family, you know, and it's not like my parents weren't speaking English at home, like you were. I mean, in the 90s and 2000s, I mean, I have some friends who came from families like that, but they're two or three social classes above me, because that's the kind of parents who would speak English at home or had an English education and stuff. And but the thing is that I'm very Bengali, like in the
Yeah.
sense that not an attribute. Like I mean, I know. I mean, I'm a translator. I translate from Bengali to English. I speak
Mm.
the language really well. At an academic level, like I
Yeah.
understand Bangla at a very deep level. I've read a lot of Bengali literature. I understand Indian literature and Indian culture. So like I've never felt like I needed to cosplay being Indian, because
I
I
like that
just
word.
think that
I like that. Yeah. Just wearing a
I,
sari during Diwali, and yeah, I get
yeah,
it.
like
Yeah.
I don't need to, but also like it is pretty weird to me to celebrate Diwali if I'm not in Delhi. Like
Right.
I want to celebrate Diwali in Delhi because I lived in Delhi. I'm a JNU student,
Mm.
and I lived in Delhi for 5 years. And for me, Diwali is very related to Delhi because that's
Yeah.
where it comes from. In Bengal, at that time is Kali Puja. That's not
Mm.
It's not Diwali. So for me to like sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of it's Diwali. I kind of miss it. Okay, where's the Diwali thing happening in Wellington? Let's go there. But it's not. It's not. It is a pretend. It's a pretend play. It's not the
It's
real thing.
like it's like ladies' night, let's just go out because it so happens that everyone's coming together,
Yeah,
or it's like TGIF kind of thing. I know what you mean. It's
yeah,
not
yeah.
for the idea of Diwali, because yeah, Diwali for you is Delhi, that setting, that set of things that make that scenario happen. Yeah, absolutely. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, Delhi smells a certain way. There's a
Yeah,
certain thing in the air. Lajpat Nagar happens, like it lights up in a certain like Diwali belongs to that belt, that
yeah,
that
yeah,
part of India. Whereas that's not happening in Calcutta. That's not how we do things there. So but also like I also feel um like see, if I don't go out to the Indian Association Diwali festival in
yeah.
Wellington, and I sit at home and watch Netflix, I don't stop being Indian. I'm still Indian. Like
Are you sure?
nobody,
I think you're no longer Indian.
like nobody's stealing my identity. Like, it's not like somebody's like, if I don't go, like a fairy will come and steal my passport and replace
Yeah.
it with a different passport. It's like I don't have to prove to anybody that this is my identity or my culture. It is part of me. It's like everybody can see it. My skin color
Yeah.
is brown. People can see it on me. I don't
Correct.
have
It's
to
not going to
go
wipe
on
away.
like
It's not going to wash away.
advertising.
Yeah. No, I don't know why people feel you have to be a part, like especially as a student, you have to be a part of Indian Association. You have to be a part of the. I'm like, you are what you are. I mean, it's not like you're trying to run towards it or escape it, right? This is you are. Even if you get a different passport, you are still Indian within
Yeah,
your
exactly.
experience
But
as a human being.
I
Yeah.
think it's loneliness, to be honest. Like
Yeah.
I think that, so I don't, yeah, like I mean I don't think that it is as much about uh oh, I'm gonna lose my identity. I'm just saying, like, from my point of view, I have never felt like I needed to do those things.
Yeah.
I could just be comfortably cosmopolitan because I think I have a very solid foundation of who I am. I've always
Yeah.
had that.
And as you said
Linguistic
in the beginning,
culture.
right, this idea if you can afford a flight ticket, you're not really alone, or you're not really isolated, or you're not really far from any particular place in the world. And
Yeah,
similarly,
yeah,
if you can communicate, now of course, then they add the finer layers of language and whether
yeah.
you speak French or whether you speak Dutch or whether you speak Bangla, whether you speak English. Okay, fair enough. Those things do happen. But for the most part, if you speak English, you're really never that alone anywhere in the world because you may be sitting, as you said, in Wellington, or you may be sitting in Bangalore, or you may be sitting in New York, and you will find another human being to talk to. Now, if you want to find things to separate you from him or her, then you can. You can say your gender, your
Mm.
sexuality, your nationality, your ethnicity, whatever these words are. But on a very fundamental level, if you can communicate in some shape or form, I know some people can't speak it, some people might not be able to physically speak, you can actually find that the human experience isn't that alone.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on I think some people need, like, they miss their country more. They feel isolated. They feel
I mean, I think that
lonely. So
enhances it, right? Like, for instance, if I meet you in Wellington or where I'm like, oh, cool, another Indian. And then we find out very quickly that our experiences as Indians are very different, right? I've never been, I've never
yeah,
been to Calcutta, or I've never this thing. And fortunately, we speak English. That's what brought us together. But beyond that, there's very different experiences. But say I meet someone who's from, say, Oregon, where I studied, I'm like, hey, wait a second, I might be Indian, you may be, a Caucasian American, but we went to the same pub or we went to the same school or something like that. I'm just trying to draw
mm,
that scenario.
mm,
And if I meet a Bangalorean in, say, Wellington, I'm like, hey, cool, you went to this place. It's the experiences that is more enriching, right? Is that
yeah.
I don't know. I'm just trying to find this. This idea that we're trying to separate through all these, as you mentioned, shallow things, right?
Well, I think it is. I mean, I think that's a bit less, outside,
Mm.
because people are just happy to meet. Like here, almost all the Uber drivers, for some reason, are Indian. All of them.
No wonder we can't get an Uber here.
Maybe they all
All
left.
sitting in
Yes.
Wellington.
A lot of them have like secondary jobs as well. Like,
Right.
some of them might be, have a 9 to 5 job, or a, 8 to 2 job, and then they
Mm.
do Uber for a couple of hours in the evening.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, yeah, almost all of them are Indian. And we always have a conversation, usually in Hindi.
Mm.
If they're from the South, then in English or something like that. And it's always, and I always like that. And, I always, it's great. It's great to catch up and hear about other people. But I personally don't go seeking it out in a Bengali association or the Indian
Yeah.
association, which I
Yeah.
think some people do. And I'm also, I want to say that I think that's a good thing. Like I think
Yeah.
there should be people, that I mean, I'm a writer. I'm a loner by definition. I'm not
Yeah.
the sort of person who goes and signs up for a committee, but there are the world needs committee organizers.
Oh
There are
yeah,
some people
absolutely.
who are very, very good at like, hacha, we're 5 Indians, we're going to start a committee. This
I mean,
is
who's
going to
going to
be the
organize the
Indian
buffet, right? For
committee.
you and me. You and I'll go eat there, but we need someone to bring them together, bring the forces, the potlucks together.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's why I think that is also what I mean by personality. Like
Mm,
some people are able to organize and are interested in organizing,
yeah,
based on a cultural association like that. And some people want that thing because they either feel isolated or lonely, or they need a connection
yeah,
to their homeland, which I think is perfectly. But everybody's needs are different, so,
yeah,
and
yeah,
everybody's abilities are different. So I'm obviously not in that Venn diagram,
yeah,
but that doesn't mean anything, like that's what
yeah,
I
yeah.
wanted to
Absolutely, it
like. That
doesn't take
doesn't,
away at all from.
yeah.
Absolutely, it's like not like a point system saying you are sitting in Wellington, you do 10 things, you're more, you're less Indian than me. It doesn't make
Yes.
sense at all.
Otherwise, somebody's going to steal your Indian identity
Correct.
from
Now suddenly, oh, Rijula, what you went for an All Blacks match? You're a Maui now. That's it. I'm done with you. And that's conversation is another one which is cropping up there, right? With the return of a lot of the practices, the rituals, the names to the original inhabitants of. I don't even know what the New Zealand, the name for New Zealand is in Maui, but I keep reading articles which suggest that there's some shift happening there.
Yeah, Aotearoa, yes. Aotearoa is the
Aotearoa? Okay,
Maori.
that's
Yeah, Tereo. Tereo means the language, basically.
ah.
Te Reo, Tereo Maori, which is the language of Maori. So Tereo is the indigenous language
Yeah.
of Maori, of Aotearoa. So yeah, place names are coming back, and I've seen it happen quite closely over the last 6 years that I've lived here. I mean, it's a longer time coming, but it's really caught on in the last 6 years that I've been here,
Mm.
and it's great to see, and it's a great conversation as well, because it is about indigeneity, and it is about your connection to the land, and stuff like that. And when you think about identity that way, nobody can really strip it away, because it's so connected to the land and connected to the people. um, and Maori is the worldview. Te Ao Maori is absolutely beautiful and fascinating. They have something called a mihi, which is where you uh, introduce yourself, and your
Mm.
introduction is, this is my name, this is my clan, this is where my ancestors have come from, this
Mm.
is my mountain, and this is my river, which I think is a very beautiful
Quite
way of,
poetic. Yeah.
yeah, of describing who you are and introducing yourself. Because when you really think about it, we are all, we are those things. We are, I mean, the natural world and does belong to us.
Mm.
And we just, like, we've moved so far away from knowing what our relationship is to the natural world, is what I'm trying to say. Like, like your mountain and your river and your field and your plain, like, because we're so removed from that. But it's a
Mm.
beautiful way to think of identity or existence.
How
Yeah.
did that, because I have no clue about the Maori or their, um, the richness of their land and what they might have been through the subjugation. I think that's a conversation which is quite in depth and quite vast, and I don't know um, how to even approach that. But sitting there and amidst this, and you said, you are who you are and you don't worry about certain tags that are given to you. But when you wrote your book, were you immersed in that environment, or were you, because you said it came out last year. So when you're sitting here talking about, I'm talking about, of course, the book which is coming out now in the US, it's called Small Deaths, and earlier it was called Death in Shonagachi. How did that shape your writing? Because you're sitting, and also maybe you can just briefly talk about what the book is
Mm.
about, just for people listening. And
Mhm.
because you're sitting here talking about all these very fundamental shifts in identity in Wellington, in New Zealand, and you're sitting
Mhm.
there not in Calcutta, and you're trying to write about this topic. So how was that experience?
Well, I mean, the hardest thing to write away from the place that you're writing about
Mm.
is the weather.
Mm.
It's very
Yeah.
hard if you're sitting in a cold climate to
Mm.
channel heat and
Feel that
sweat.
frustration of that sweat down your back. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes, but other than that, I honestly think that you can put a writer anywhere. I mean, we have to like if a book is going well, let me put it that way, in the sense of like the actual writing of the story. If the act of writing is going well, you can do it in a cave at the end of the world. Like it doesn't matter if you're in Mauritius, because I'm not reporting.
Mm.
I'm not a journalist. I don't have to go and see it to describe. It's probably very close to painting.
Mm.
Um, I mean, sure, some people might need to stare at a beautiful valley and do it, but
Mm.
like have to actually see it to do it. But Bob Ross could do it in a studio.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter because what you're writing about is in your head and your heart, and it's not the objective reality. So yeah, so I don't think that there was any special difference because I wrote a lot of it in New Zealand.
Mm.
It would have been the same if I sat and wrote it in America or
Mm.
Patagonia. But
Mm.
yeah, the book was actually written. I'm just going to hold this up for those of you who are watching. This
Yeah.
is the new paperback. It's called A Death in Shonagachhi. This is the Indian one. If you're in India, for the rest of the world, it's coming out on September 13th.
I think the episode will be out
For
by then.
both.
So yeah, I think you guys can go pick up a copy if you're living in
Yeah,
the US. And
yeah.
yeah, I
If you're in
mean,
the US or the rest of the world, it's Small Deaths, and otherwise it's called in India. You can find it under the title Death in Shonagachhi. It's published by Picador.
two
It's a
books, one
novel.
origin, just national identity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is. Yeah, it's the same book. It's the same book essentially. It's just got two different titles. The book is. Sorry, I was just like looking around to see if I had a copy of Small Deaths, but
Mm. Why did you
I'm
change the
not.
name? Was it a publisher's decision or?
Yeah, it was the publisher's decision.
Right.
So a lot of publishing uh, hopes that people will a book will have word of mouth
Yeah. Yeah.
um, push, and if you can't say the word,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
it
No,
kind of
Small
gets
Death sounds a bit
more.
like a Robert Galbraith kind of the kind of series, the Cormoran Strike series, right? Like Troubled Blood, Small Deaths. I like it. I
Yeah,
like of course, as an Indian, the word Shonagachi. It's not easy, but at the same time, it's not alien. But I get it. Like it's something that people have to be able to repeat often. And
yeah,
what's the book about? Like, what's the
yeah.
story? Yeah.
It's set in Shanagachi, which is in Calcutta. It's actually the largest red light district in Asia,
Mm.
not just Calcutta. Uh, Obviously, the census is always undercounted. It's
Mm.
probably more people than we think there are in Shanagachi.
Mm.
It's the largest red light district. So the book is entirely set there. Lali, who's the main character, is a 30-something sex worker who was trafficked as a child to Shonagati, and she is thinking about her future and trying to get out of this life by becoming a highly paid escort
Right.
so that she can have some sense of stability and some more financial security for her future before her earning days are over. So she's trying to transition into that. There's another main character, Estilu Shah, who is an erotic novelist. So
Mm.
he writes those little cheap erotica books that are sold. There's that entire market for uh, cheap erotica, and
Like
he
50
writes
Shades of Grey,
those.
but a shorter version.
No, about a lot more desi.
Yeah, a lot more, of course. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The kind you can buy in train stations and
Right,
don't
right.
worry. Yeah, it's good. Should desi porn,
Yeah. Okay.
basically.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, should desi. He's a writer of should desi porn. His dream is to become a big writer someday, and he's in love with Lali, who he considers his muse, and she absolutely has no time for him.
Mm.
And in the middle of all of this, and there's a bunch of other characters. Lali's next door neighbor, a woman called Mahamaya, gets she's killed in the very first chapter. So
Right.
it's not a spoiler. It's just
Not
there.
giving away too
It's
much. Of
where
course,
the
we don't want you to
story
give away too much. I want to get the
no,
people to get the
it's
book.
where the
Yeah.
story begins. It's right. It's right in the beginning, and it is about how that death then it's about it is how that death then um has repercussions across these characters' lives, which is why I really like the title "A Death in Shonagachi," which is it is about a death in Shonagachi. It's like what happens, it is based on a crime, but I don't think of it as a crime novel or a
Yeah.
mystery or a thriller or any of those things. It is investigating deaths that we are not investigating, deaths that we accept as a matter of course, that we let slip through the cracks, or we don't talk about, or we just pretend don't happen. And those kind of deaths
Yeah.
happen
And it brings
very
to the
often.
surface all these various social currents that are prevalent in Shonagachi, which, as you mentioned, is a red light district. But I think I also remember reading that the the issues surrounding the life of sex workers, right? How they got there, the way they are living, the way they are being exploited, the way they try. Some of them try to break that trap. So are these some of the things that you address in the book? And how did you find this particular? I mean, the location itself. Like why Shonagachi?
Well, I've always been very interested in space, as in geographic space, not astronomy, not space, not outer space, but
Hmm.
I like to analyze space and how
Right.
we understand or think of space. My PhD is in relationship between sexual violence in India and public space.
Mm.
So how do we understand public space in relation to the the female body? Like,
Mm.
how are we allowed to use it or not use it, or what are the unwritten rules, what are the punishments, how do we exist as women in public space, um, and that's also or how we don't exist as women in public space. um, so it comes from there. And when you think about the red light district in terms of space, it's very interesting because it's simultaneously it is allowed and not allowed. So red
Okay.
light districts are usually the oldest parts of any town in the world. It's usually, it will be, if you look in the history, a very, very old neighborhood. And they don't move. They're there, they're allowed to exist for in very patriarchal and conservative societies. So,
Mm.
and they're often illegal. The law is like you can't solicit sex work, but you can be a sex worker, but you can't. So there's always these like this catch-22 legal situations.
Yeah, it's almost
So
like
they're
it's
essentially,
yeah.
yeah, they're essentially illegal places, but also the oldest places.
Right.
Um, so I think that when you look at it in terms of space, it's a very interesting space. Plus, like, what is a brothel? Is it a private space or is it a public space?
Mm.
And it's not just a brothel. Like, I mean, so my PhD, like, I look at a bunch of Bollywood movies and stuff as well. So Masan is a great example, one of my favorite movies of all time. They get caught in the hotel, and the first scene in Masan where uh, Richa Chadda's character meets a boy in a hotel room, and you can tell that this is their first time. They're very inexperienced, and the hotel owner calls the police, and the police come and take video of them, and the guy, and basically goes on to blackmail them
Yeah.
and arrest them.
Yeah.
So, but the question is a hotel room public space or is it private space?
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and if it is a private space, then what's allowed, what's not allowed. Like I mean, like people won't call marital rape because it's happening essentially in a private home, but a hotel isn't. So anyway, I just think that space in terms of sexual violence and is very fascinating when you look at it from that lens. So I guess
Yeah.
that's a very vague answer to
No, I think no.
why
It got me thinking.
Shonagachhi was
No, it got me thinking. I mean, of
set.
course, the book will.
Yeah.
It I think is got rave reviews. But I want to understand this because that entire movement around the thing that happened in Delhi with Nurbaya, right? Of course, wasn't the first and was definitely not the last, but it created the spark in this movement around this conversation, and obviously women's safety in public places, the narrative of how men look at women, and all these things have been said, right? I'm not even sort of touching the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the issues that were raised. But and again, it's a very very vast conversation. But how I don't know if it again goes back to our Indian conversation, but what is the sense of the thing? Because as you said, sex work is very old. I mean, there are courtesans. There are so many different names for them. Even back in time, there were the male prostitutes, whatever the name given to them. But
Mm-hmm.
um, this whole hypocrisy surrounding sex is such a evident thing in these situations because you have the red light district in Amsterdam, which people celebrate, like, oh, I went to the red light district, and in fact it's like a joke amongst guys, right? Oh, I went to the wink wink nudge nudge. And somewhere I heard recently that they're going to move that entire red light district into a building which is going to be safer for the sex workers.
Right.
But the way you say red light district, or not you or me, but maybe some person visiting it, would be with a very different undertone or a different connotation when they say, like, oh, I went to Thailand, wink wink nudge nudge, or I went to the Amsterdam red light, wink wink, or I went to like in Singapore you have the Geylang district or whatever if it's a district or an area. But these are all the same things. The women or the men, or predominantly women, are of different races or ethnic backgrounds, but they're the same kind of offerings on the menu. Sorry for making it sound so trivial, but it's pretty much the same kind of work. But why do we look at it with such different lenses as human beings?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I can answer for everybody.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to
But
understand. I don't even know if it's a question.
yeah,
As I told you at the
I
beginning, I ask questions I don't have answers, or no one has answers to.
well, there's always a good way to why ask questions that you already have answers to.
Yeah. No, I don't have answers to any of them, and I don't think it can be answered as a
Which is
question.
why, yeah, it's a good thing to ask. But
Yeah.
yes, I think it's twofold. Look, I mean, sex is never about sex. Sex is
Mm,
about power
mm,
and domination. That's all sex is about. Like, I mean, sex like music or food or language or love is many different things.
mm,
It's not one thing. But sex is paid sex, or in most cases, a lot of sex is about power and domination.
mm.
Like they say, rape has nothing to do with sex. Rape has everything to do with power.
Yeah,
It's just about who has power.
yeah,
It doesn't matter who is sex starved. It doesn't matter if there are, the reason there is rape is not because there are more scantily clad women in Bollywood and ads. That's not the
yeah. But if
reason.
that's the case,
It's
if it's
not.
power, then just go shout at someone if you want to be more powerful. Then why go to the act of, I'm just sort of thinking
That
out
is
loud. Yeah,
that's the same. Like, it's not that for the act of power is a very is a wide range of things. It is
yeah, yeah,
turning off somebody's water supply
yeah.
as a landlord, you know. It's not just screaming at people. It's killing somebody. It's
Correct.
slapping somebody. It's saying you don't have right to drink from this pot
The
because you're low
degrees.
caste.
Correct. The
You know,
degrees.
it's
Yeah.
all expressions of power.
Yeah.
It's all about power. Caste is about power. Rape is about power. All of these things are about employment. Often is about power.
Yeah.
The boss will get you to do very menial things because they
Yeah.
can.
And they
Humans,
pat you on the back with an award saying, "You worked with us for 10 years. We celebrate you." Yeah, I
yeah,
get it.
yeah. I mean, humans can be very inventive when it comes to um, misusing power
Mm.
uh, for the worse.
Yeah.
Humans have. You only need to look at the kings that
Yeah.
India has had. That's this. This is the same thing. So, which is the same as rape is got everything to do with power. Um, and I think so. That's one thing. One thing is why we look at sex work or red light district is about power. It's about it's that economy, is that mess actually. It's a huge mess of power and coercion and oppression um, uh, and all of those things. And that doesn't always mean that the women have no power. That's not to say that the
Okay.
women have power. There is
Yeah.
agency. Agency is also a very complicated thing. Like some people who in front of you don't have agency, or you don't think that they have agency in other contexts or in other ways. Like power and agency are more complex than people often think they are.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And the other thing is our discomfort with sex in general, which comes from Puritanism. So for in Judeo-Christian tradition countries, it comes from denial of the flesh. It comes from believing that you need to suffer. Life is
Yeah.
about suffering. So therefore, you're not any act of pleasure is actually bad. And in
Yeah.
India, it comes from the same tradition, but from 19th century Puritanism and all of those things where, and the rest of it is taken care of with power.
Yeah.
But like our entire Devdasi system,
Yeah.
for example, that's power and coercion,
Yeah.
even if you don't call it prostitution.
Yeah. Yeah.
Harems for kings, many wives.
Mm.
That's the same thing, except they never got paid or a chance to choose their customer. The customer was the most powerful man in the country. But I think it is, broadly speaking, our discomfort, if you want to put it that way, or our hush hush, nudge nudge attitude towards sex and paid sex is our discomfort to acknowledge how big a role power plays in sex. Who buys it, who sells it, how they approach it, and our basically deep belief that we don't deserve pleasure or joy.
Right.
We are not allowed to say anything good happened to you. Like you can't say that I'm so happy, life is going so well.
Oh,
I
no,
think
no, no. No, no,
you're
no.
not
Yeah,
allowed
yeah,
to
yeah.
say that. Like
That's
there's a very deep rooted part of humans that are not allowed to have anything good
and
as
if you
well.
say that, then the next minute someone's trying to dig some dirt on you to bring you down.
And it's like, I mean, also Indians have a whole thing for that, right? Like, I mean, if you say something good is happening, something bad will for sure happen.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
the whole superstition thing.
It's crazy, yeah.
The way.
But did you sense through writing this book, I just will probably wind up, I just want to ask this idea that, okay, paid sex is exploitation. Of course it is. There are a lot of young girls, women. Again, I'm not an expert on this topic, but I've heard through reading a little bit and listening to some podcasts about this, that girls are sold into the sex, the sex trafficking, traffickers across countries again. There are hubs for this, like like Singapore. Even though it's the most righteous country on the outside, they have it on the inside, like Dubai, or you look at in Africa, wherever it may be, it exists. And that's, of course, a very, very prevalent and dark side of sex trafficking. But this is a very big but, and I'm going to ask the question since you've written about it. I don't know if you've done research. Is there a, like how you have independent, strong women who choose the work they want to do, is there that side to sex work which you've come across?
Oh, definitely. I mean,
Okay.
yeah, if somebody picks up my book, or if somebody who's listening to this has read the book already, it is about agency. It is not at all about people who are being, I mean, it is about people who are being exploited, but that doesn't mean that they don't have agency. So I also wanted to problematize the idea of agency. And, it's not like there's this bunch of women that just is waiting there for somebody to swoop in and save them,
Yeah.
That's not what's happening, because life just doesn't work that way. And also, like most things in life, things are not as simple as they first appear. So Shonagachi, for example, last count, I think they said 10,000 sex workers, and that's just sex workers, and it's not even 10,000. It's probably closer to 30, to be honest. And
Wow.
that's just sex workers. So, that's not. It's not like Shonagachi is only inhabited by sex workers.
Yeah.
Shopkeepers live there because they have pan biri shops,
Yeah.
like they sell cigarettes. Somebody has to sell cigarettes. There has to be grocery stores. There is a guy who sells meat. It's a neighborhood. There are children. There are schools. There are old people. There is doctors. There's
Doctors. Yeah. Yeah.
dispensaries.
Yeah.
It's life. People have a very and the culprit is actually Bollywood, because Bollywood, there's always, there's so many scenes in brothels and red light districts, and none of which is remotely true.
Yeah.
They're just this little interlude where the heartbroken hero will go and have a night out to drown his sorrows, or the villain will go to show how villainous he is. He just goes to a red light district. Wow.
Yeah.
But none of them are based in reality for what they are, which is
A neighborhood.
very congested neighborhood,
Yeah.
with everything that a neighborhood has.
You're more likely
And-
to go into a meat shop than like into a brothel sometimes.
Yeah, I mean,
Looking for the wrong
it's
kind of
not
meat.
in fact, like there are families who rent homes there because,
Yeah.
like this, the thing is, like sometimes it sounds shocking. Let's say there is a young family who's just had a child who live in Shonagachi. Nobody is a sex worker. Like if I tell you that, you might be like, "Wow!" Like that.
But it makes sense because there's, I mean, not makes sense, but in the sense it's in some way you're not going to get bothered, and there are a lot of women around to help. Is that make
No,
sense?
it's not just makes sense. It makes sense in terms of logistics. It's a
Yeah.
big city.
Yeah.
People don't always find houses to
Yeah.
rent.
Yeah.
Like it's just like, but if somebody just,
It's just
I'm
a
just
home.
saying
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that, like, because I mean, the book is based on about it took me 7 years to write, and it's based on years of research because I did
Yeah.
a PhD on this topic. But I mean, I'm just saying this, like, it's not like I knew all of this before I started looking into it. But at the end of the day, it was sometimes it's like, well, obviously, it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, obviously there are families who live there because
Yeah.
it's a big city. Some people, maybe that's the only place they could find to rent or whatever.
Yeah.
So so similarly, Shonagachi it's not like everybody who is doing sex work in Shonagachi was trafficked into it,
Right.
either. Like,
Right.
I mean, which is not to say that people who are trafficked into it also don't have agency. I'm just saying that there's no one size fits all.
It's very
Like, there's a
complex.
woman-
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very complex. I met a woman there. She's a sex worker, very beautiful, very young. She was absolutely shocked that I don't have a retirement plan. She's like, "What is your retirement?" I was like, "I don't have one. I don't have it. I don't know if I can even retire." She actually has, with partners, she is an investor in a shrimp exportation business to the US. So
That's pretty
her
crazy,
business
yeah.
exports small shrimp, the tiny shrimps, to US. One of the main customers are the Chinese restaurants in New York City.
That's enterprising, which you never sort of give them the credit for.
And she's a sex worker, and she's not very educated, but she has a very good financial brain. Like she's just
Yeah, yeah.
one of those people. She understands. Like she's very good that way. You know, like that's a way that my brain just doesn't work. For example,
I mean,
so
they
I'm
have
just saying
skills
that.
that we don't recognize in them, right? I mean, sex work is the label we give them, but what you're saying is they have so many things. Some might be amazing. What do you call that? Like they might make amazing masalas, or they might make amazing dresses, or they might make whatever it may be, which you don't even think that they are worth that because you think that they're on their backs the whole day doing sex work, right?
I mean, yeah, and they do, but like people, I'm just saying that the humans are just more complex than
Yeah, yeah.
it's not just about say education or training or talent or any of those things. It's just that every human being's circumstance is more unique than anybody ever imagines they are, you know. So but you know, for example, so there are people who've been trafficked there, but there are also housewives who drop their children off, and they go do sex work in Shonagachi, rent a you know, if they get a customer, they
Yeah,
have this, they can get a free room and pay the room fee, so 3 days a week, a few hours, you know. Nobody knows at home. They
yeah,
might, you know, say that they're waiting outside the school for their kid, but they come here and they do this. There are college kids, lots of them. You don't even have to be in Shanagachi. A lot of this can be done, you know, over WhatsApp and all of
yeah,
those
yeah, yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah.
Technology is like really changed. But I'm just saying that sex work is not
All
one
kinds.
size fits
Yeah,
all.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not like, and also like even the most abject cases, like it's not like people are waiting around to be rescued either. You know, it's just like there's a whole political debate about whether sex work is work. And if it is work, then why are they not given labor rights?
Right.
Because you know, there's a huge history in our world, not just in India, of fighting for our labor rights. So if you are a laborer, like if you can work in a mine
Yeah.
and you have the right to unionize and claim your labor rights and have a say 2 day weekend, or a whatever, you know, all these hard fought rights that nobody came and gave us, right? Like the world fought for these rights to be
Why aren't
recognized
these
as
people
laborers.
being given
Yeah,
those same
so,
rights? Yeah.
and also like in every profession, the idea is that you can better your life through your profession. If you're
Yeah.
an electrician, if you work in a mine, if you're an agricultural laborer, you're doing this to better your life.
Yeah.
Somehow sex work is the only industry where you need to be somehow rescued from your industry, you know. I mean, it's not like mining is a particularly great
Oh,
industry,
it's yeah. It's in
you know.
fact physically more harmful in some ways. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, mining is horrible. You know, it's not that there is no exploitation there. It's not that fishing doesn't have any exploitation, but there's a lot of moral connotations with, you know, things like that. So you know, so you have to rescue this women, and then these women, and the sarkari alternative is pickle making or petticoat making or sewing classes. That's not going to be enough for most of these are single women
Yeah.
who are or single mothers, sorry, or they are married. A lot of them are married, and they are taking care of their husbands. They're the sole breadwinner.
Right.
They're the ones for the family. They're the ones. Gender roles are a bit skewed there. So the husbands usually don't do it. Like they do housework, a lot of housework and stuff. The women is the are the more the breadwinners. But I mean, they're not gonna like all their children are in school. They're like any other parent. They want their children to, you know, have a good education, become doctors, engineers, and stuff like that. And that's not going to happen in modern India, in a big city, with them making pickles, you know.
Yeah.
So
No, you kind of, yeah, I mean, I kind of said that, right? Like the recipes or the masalas. It's kind of what's been sold to you, right? That's all they're good for. But you're right. Like that lady who has the shrimp export, stake in the shrimp export. You, they once you recognize their potential and not subjugate them to the label of not being good enough for anything except being exploited, it opens up possibilities that are not even acknowledged.
yeah, I mean, and including within sex work, if somebody wants to stay in sex work,
Yeah.
there are ways to make it safer. There is ways to
Yeah.
make it, you know, there's ways to make it
Dignified.
sustainable.
Yeah.
yeah, and dignified, and life doesn't work that way. It's not like I rescue you from this and I put you in that, and
Yeah.
therefore we have a happy ending. Like,
Like Pretty Woman. Yeah. Yeah.
the people with graduate degrees in India, most of people who are in low paid manual labor jobs probably have bachelor's degrees at this point of time.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's not like, it's not like we have an abundance of jobs for people
Yeah, and
to
people think
go.
automatically that you work at a bank, you work in a tech park, you have a respectable job. But many
Yeah.
of these people are commuting for 4 hours a day and they can't take care of their kids because they don't get to see their kids because their kids are in school the whole time. So yeah, I think it's really nice that you captured it the way you did. Is that there's no one right way. At the same time, don't discount one and don't glorify the other.
Yeah, labor is a complex issue, and the problem is we don't recognize labor in many ways. Like, we confuse labor with morality, we confuse
Mm,
labor with worth and dignity. So we never look at labor objectively
yeah.
as a commodity. In fact, labor is a commodity. Labor is also a political point. Like, all the things that we have, the 5-day weekend, the Saturday Sunday off, the salary, HR process, these are all hard fought political battles
Yeah.
that were not dropped from the sky because we could demand the fruits of labor. But we don't consider a manual scavenger's labor
Mm.
worth as much as the labor of someone else,
And that's
or
something I
yeah,
hope we see positive change with, because that's something
yeah,
which is so, like, a carpenter is not seen as valuable as a lawyer, while, and that's what exactly what happens now when the person doesn't value that particular craft. You have diminishing quality. Like, no one wants to make good furniture because no one is told that being a carpenter is a dignified good job, and as a result you have like really shitty chairs and things that are falling apart because you resort to the likes of, IKEA or Amazon, where you just get something because, oh, it's a chair, but it doesn't last because, or even something like plumbing, or as you said, like what the topics we've spoken about. But it's only those three. I mean, you can't have a society filled with only engineers and IT people, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah, it's a
exactly.
very good point, and thanks for capturing it so, um, I think, in a very clear way, because it's something that people need to acknowledge.
Thanks, Sandeep.
Yeah. No, I think, and I hope, there's positive change even when it comes to the quality of lives and recognition in people's potential and the human spirit. And for people who haven't read your book, Small Deaths in Outside India, and in India it's called Death in Shonagachi. Um, Thank you so much, Rijula, for joining me and having a fun chat, because it really was eye-opening for me in many ways, in many spaces. So thanks.
Thanks for having me, Sandeep. Once there's an audiobook, so I hope you listen to it, and if
Oh,
you do
lovely.
listen to it, let me know how you like it. Yes.
Yes, I'm going to do that. Hopefully, I will read it before I record the introduction for this, so then I can give people, I'm not like you need my review, but I'll tell people how good it is and compel them to go read it. But really appreciate it, and hope we can meet at some point in our respective countries.
Yeah, I'm often in Bangalore. My brother lives there, so
Oh,
I'm sure
fantastic. Okay. Do
sure I'll
drop me an
pass
email when
by.
you're here next, and
It's
we'll catch up.
Bangalore is the next big Bengali city. So
Yes, I know friends of mine who are Bengali who live here, and yes,
yeah.
uh, I grew up with a couple of them. So yeah, they're fun.
Thanks for having me, Sandeep.
Good
Have
luck
a
with everything. Good luck with the
good
launch
day.
of
Thanks.
the Small Deaths, and I hope
Thanks.
it gets all the accolades that it deserves. And talk to you soon, and take care of yourself.
Thanks. You too.